So raise your hand if you have never felt bored. Think about when was the last time that you felt bored? When was the last time you felt boredom? Because here's what I think boredom actually is. I haven't yet heard one good account of what boredom actually is. And I think it's actually just pretty simple. But first, I encourage you to think about what's your own personal definition of boredom. Go back to when you actually remember and have a real memory of feeling bored and what was really going on. And why am I mentioning this? Because I feel like boredom is actually pretty simple. I feel that it's just a reaction or an absence to the types of stimuli that you're normally addicted to. It's like the false emptiness of a mind that doesn't know where to turn to for its usual source of external stimulation. Now, I think there's a case to be made for linking genuine boredom with some of our developmental years when we are on such an intense path of like cognitive growth, personal growth, internal growth, when you're still in that place where everything is a new experience, then I think boredom is kind of like there's like a legitimate place for boredom because you're kind of in a place where you need all of this stimuli at a certain period in your life. And when I look back, I feel I can definitely associate some of my last periods of like genuine boredom with those years. And so maybe it lasted, I would have those episodes until I think I was maybe 14 was the last time that I think that I would say that I was genuinely could genuinely have been bored with a state of affairs. And what I would link this to is that it's it's when you haven't yet, how would I put this? Once you're fully present and you're kind of like tapped into your own center of source or your own sense of like higher purpose, and these are like very connected, right? You don't have that experience of boredom because now you've found your source, you've found like your place of flow. And so it doesn't mean that you're always in flow, but it means that you're tapped in to such an extent that your mind isn't like feeding off of like stimuli in the same way that it is naturally developmentally, or from a state of just needing to be distracted or whatever other dissociation. If someone is living their life continually in a reaction, continually or only as a function of their job, their economic situation, external relationships, then they may still reach a place of boredom, a feeling of boredom when they're out of sync with their stimuli and they don't have any kind of like internal or intrinsic motivation or intrinsic relationship to their own sense of purpose. But for example, like if you think of like any creative person, anyone engaged in some kind of creative project, writers, artists, whatever, builders, developers, like boredom is not really a state. I mean, let me know if you think of counterexamples to this, or, anyone who does still experience this if you're a creator. But based on the way I've experienced this and the way I understand it, I don't think it's an issue at all. And so here we obviously are going to keep boredom distinct from states like fatigue or ennui, which is a type of like existential fatigue. You're kind of like tired because things are repetitive. I wouldn't call that boredom. Boredom is a sign that you don't know how to direct your mind. And I feel that certain states, which are basically states of fatigue, might kind of present themselves to you as boredom, or maybe because you can't easily recognize the fatigue, you may kind of categorize them as boredom, but it's actually fatigue. And in all cases, I think that whether it's genuine boredom or you're just feeling that this is boredom, it's always a sign that you're kind of like cut off from your own source, from your own like kind of internal flow of guidance. And it's just a call to like come back to your body, to come back to presence. And often it's definitely a call to get rest and to reintegrate, so to speak. You'd be surprised like how much fatigue is actually like the culprit in so many issues. So I think boredom is essentially the experience of disconnect. And for example, if you feel stuck between decisions, or you can't make a decision, or kind of like pressuring yourself to like get the next thing done and you can't. I mean, obviously you need sleep. You need like you're dealing with fatigue, and it's causing the disconnect. So you can just experience it the next morning when you actually have like a solid 7 or 8 or 9, whatever you need, hours of sleep. You notice the difference, right? And it's easy to remember on this side, but it's always easy to forget, like when you're in the middle of that experience. So the other piece here is that boredom is kind of like a false state of emptiness of mind, whereas having a genuine emptiness of mind is actually like a good thing. It's very positive. It means like your mind can properly react, it can properly generate what it needs to, for what you're engaged in and for responding to the world. And the reason I'm thinking about this is because it just it's just so clear now how many people need to actually work on removing so many sources of stimuli from their lives. Um, I mean, maybe you figured this out years ago also, but increasingly, and maybe this is like the younger generations now too, everyone's moving through the moment at different times, right? But you need to log off. You need to like dial down all of these extra sources of input and all of these extra sources of news, which now is located on various social media threads. And really just to like clear out all of these other sounds and signals so that your mind can actually come back to a place of like total quiet, so that you can regenerate your own source of energy and get back in sync with your own flow. Is kind of like an overused concept, but you do have like an internal process and an internal temporality that you need to get back in sync with in order to receive your guidance and understand where you are and what you need to do next. And so maybe this does feel like boredom at first, but you need to train yourself in this space and train yourself in being able to empty out your mind, which is really a way of resting your mind so that it will actually have the energy and the focus to enable you to use it in the way that's actually beneficial for the next thing you need. And so I think the last point I would make here is to recognize for yourself when you are in a state of that type of rest and needing that type of rest, and maybe you're like just sitting down and you're not like doing anything. You feel like you're not doing anything. You're not reading. You're not productive in those kinds of ways, but you're actually giving your mind this like super basic rest, which is actually, of course, super productive. So just to recognize that and not to think that that's some kind of state of boredom or, some sort of state of like laziness, obviously, but to recognize when it's happening because it means you need it. Fatigue is always calling you back to the body and calling you back into presence. So this is how you return from the edges of the spinning wheel, basically, and like come back to your own center. And the more you can like pull your energy back from these like instincts or urges towards action in the external world, the more you will have your energy available to you in the quiet center that allows so much of your internal natural memory to arise again. And that's really like one of your jewels, right? When you can like have get back in touch with that flow of like spontaneous memory, not just like not associative memory like random thoughts about last week or something, but a kind of like deeply intuitively linked memory that is like fully in touch with the actual continuity of your life and what you're drawing on, the real trajectory of your energy, your soul path. That's really like the sweet spot. That's like the real juice, so to speak. That's the deep memory that so many of us are cut off from in today's world, in the fragmentation that is now like the natural state of so many things, and it's what you really want to work against. So that's how you access deep memory, and this is why you also want to make a regular practice of returning to that triad of like spaciousness, stillness, and silence, or solitude, stillness, and silence. This is how you regenerate.